sorry. My timing, I know it stinks, but I just keep thinking this thing with us, it's going to go away. I keep thinking if I can just keep moving and checking, I'll get clear. But do you understand what I'm telling you?
I don't want to fight anymore.
No, I mean, yeah, I don't want to fight anymore.
We have to skate.
This won't wait. Kate, maybe I wasn't ready. Maybe you didn't give me much of a chance. Maybe, I don't know. I just...
Mosley, Dorsey, 1 minute.
Kate, somewhere in the middle of all this, I fell in love with you.
You may take the ice.
I'm saying I love you. I'm saying it out loud.
Les concurrents suivants représentant les États-Unis sont Mosley et Dorsey.
Don't say we're not right for each other, because the way I see it, we might not be right for anybody else.
I have to go on.
Shut up a minute! It can't be any harder to stay together than it was to stay apart.
Vous avez 30 secondes pour les questions. 30 seconds.
Will you wait a minute?
On peut pas arrêter là.
Kate, I need you. I need you.
We're doing the Pamchenko.
What?
Oh, you heard me.
You think I'm doing all this to get a program out of you?
Welcome to episode 66 of the Monday Morning Critic. We have a guest that I've been chasing for some time, one of my all-time favorite actors, DB Sweeney. DB, how's it going today, my man?
It's so good to be on the right side of the grass.
Very well said, my friend. Very well said. So before we get into kind of your career, I kind of want to talk about your early days in a bit here. You know, raised in Long Island. I hope I'm correct with that. Dad's a teacher.
Yeah, he was a teacher, history teacher, later became a guidance counselor and then an assistant principal. So public school, employee for most of the time that I was living at home.
Yeah, and how about how does he receive your the idea that you want to kind of pursue this dream of acting and all this wonderful stuff you've achieved? How does Dad look at that early on?
Yeah, I think my whole family was very skeptical because we don't know anybody in the business. We're out on Long Island and just living like a normal kind of suburban blue collar life. And when I started to become an actor, was doing theater in New York, and just me getting a part in a Broadway play just seemed like visiting another planet. And I didn't really expect to have it turn into a career. I thought it'd be something fun to do for a little while, and then go to law school and become an asshole or be a chef or whatever. That didn't really seem possible. And then a few years later, Francis Ford Coppola gives me the lead in his movie. And all of a sudden, I really am in Hollywood. And it's been, 35 years. I'm very grateful to all the opportunities I had in those early days.
Yeah, and there's so much I want to get into here, but I just researching, I found out stuff I didn't even know. Like, you do voiceover work for Mountain Men. You used to do voiceover work for Oprah. Am I right with that?
Yeah. I was actually very surprised that I never met Miss Oprah, but by all accounts, people that ran the company told me that she personally selected me to be the voice. I had to audition, and it was fun. I love the voiceover gig because it's very subtle, and I do NFL Network. At one time, I was the voice of Lincoln Navigator, Bud Light. I've had some really big accounts, and there's a subtle difference, and I think most people can tell when it's Morgan Freeman or when it's David Duchovny is a guy who has a very distinctive voice. Guys like that, you know who they are. James Earl Jones, obviously, but I've sort of prided myself in. I can sound different. I mean, to be the voice of Mountain Men, which is kind of like a redneck, hillbilly, gruff sound, to the voice of Oprah Winfrey Network, which is a more urban, maybe educated, cleaner sound. I don't know. So, I take a lot of pride in that versatility.
Yeah, man. You mentioned those names of people that are up there. Liam Neeson. That's good company, man. And those jobs, I have to believe. I mean, you know much more than I do. Those voiceover ones are the ones that people want the most, right? Those are the jobs that people covet.
Well, you get paid like you get paid. I don't get paid celebrity money. I get paid like I'm a voiceover guy. So I have to do 10 accounts to get, say, whatever TD Ameritrade is going to pay Matt Damon. I need 10 accounts to get what he gets. So it's a two-edged sword. If you're very distinctive, and they feel like the audience is getting an instant recognition. You get paid for that as well. You just can't have multiple accounts then.
I got you.
Morgan Freeman.
Yeah, so, you get your BFA at NYU in 1990. Doug, tell me about any mentor you had early on or how much NYU plays into the actor you are today. And I ask that question a lot of the actors on my show. So it's basically how much did NYU play into you being the guy you are today, or Tulane, I suppose, and did you have any mentors along the way?
Yeah, I've been very fortunate to have a lot of mentors. NYU was a strange experience for me because at that time, they didn't have dorm rooms for most students. So you had to be. So I grew up 67 miles away from NYU, I think, or 66 miles away on Long Island. But because I was inside 100 miles or 75 miles, wherever the cutoff was, I couldn't get a dorm room. So I wasn't eligible for a dorm room. So, I was out on the street kind of, sharing apartments and, scrapping away, living the New York lifestyle, along with, my dad didn't have money to pay for my whole tuition. So I was earning money to pay my tuition, trying to do plays, and trying to pay my rent. So in one sense, NYU's sort of lack of support or nurturing of me as a 18-year-old kid, it forced me into the world earlier. So I think it did have something to do with me, but I felt like the whole structure of the place was very much about money. And in 1983, I was a senior at NYU, and I got a part in a Broadway play I mentioned earlier, and it wasn't a big part and it wasn't much money, but I was in the business, and I thought, what am I going to school for acting if here I am? So I go back to NYU, I say I'm going to withdraw, and they say, no, don't withdraw. Just keep a journal while you're on, I only needed a few more credits. Just keep a journal during the play and submit that in, and we'll give you your degree. And then, so I come back after the play's over, and they said, yeah, you got to give us the journal plus a check for $12,000. And I was like, what do you mean? You guys said you were going to just, and so I wasn't going to give them $12,000. So a couple of years later, when I got my first part, I had this very smart guy who was a lawyer friend of mine who said, let me just send him a letter. So I had this movie before Coppola hired me called Fire with Fire. It was an independent movie with Virginia Madsen. And it was going to come out from Paramount. So the lawyer calls up NYU and says, hey, Paramount Pictures publicity department is wanting to know if they should include the fact that D.B. Sweeney is an alumni of NYU in his bio. And I had a diploma by FedEx in 3 days.
Wow.
So it was like they were all about, if I wasn't about to be in a movie, they would have been like, yeah, too bad, give us the $12,000.
Right. And, do you have a lot of influences getting older as you kind of develop as an actor, or is it just limited to maybe like a few people, you think?
That movie I referenced before, Gardens of Stone, I was working with James Earl Jones and Dean Stockwell, two actors that are already veteran actors at that point, obviously, icons in a certain sense. And both of them were very generous to me and with their time. And I find that the mentor relationships that I had early on, it wasn't really so much about, he said this one thing that day that just sent me on the right path. It's why I think being a mentor is giving of your time, because if you're established in a career or in a field, and the most valuable thing you have once you've taken care of making money and making your name for yourself is your time. So James Earl Jones would always sit with me in between takes, and if I was trying to figure out how to play the part or how to do a certain thing, he wouldn't say a lot. He would just hang out with me, and him hanging out with me was very reassuring. And it meant a lot to me. It does to this day.
Yeah, and let me ask you, so like the last few actors I've had have been extraordinarily passionate about theater. Is it safe to say, would you put yourself in that same kind of group? Would you consider yourself extremely passionate about theater?
Yeah, I would say of all I've had great experiences, Lonsome Dove and 8 Men Out and a bunch of other great movie situations where, once in a lifetime opportunities where you're going to work with certain people or whatever. But the most thrilling moments I think that I've had as an actor are on stage. And it's because there's no take two. Here we are, we got to do it. And I learned the most about acting. Like when I first started out at NYU, I couldn't get any parts. Then maybe that's the other reason I have a little bit of resent for them too, is that the first part I got at NYU was on Broadway. But so on the time when I wasn't getting cast in these productions, I would do the lights or I would do the sound. And I remember being up on the lighting grid, lighting the technical run-throughs of plays. And I learned more about acting doing that than any part I ever played. I would watch actors who were succeeding and watch actors who were failing and watch them work through the problems or not work through the problems. And I learned so much that way.
Yeah, and you told me kind of a cool story off air about you did a play around Massachusetts. We're based out of Massachusetts. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, I did a bunch of, I must have done 30 or 35 plays before I ever got, into the movie business in a big way. But one of the ones I did was a tour of a play called The Unexpected Guest, and we did it at Stage West in Springfield, Massachusetts. And there was a great Irish actor named Jarlath Conroy, who I later on did another play in Massachusetts with. Under Milkwood, we did it at Williamstown. But so An Unexpected Guest at Stage West, we're there in the hottest part of the summer, and the air conditioning failed. So I don't know what the subscription base of Stage West is right now, but at that time, I think the median age was like 107. And so the audience was old, and they were not withstanding the heat of the summer without air conditioning very well. So I'm playing the part of a Welsh detective who's kind of an idiot. Fun part, but I don't have a lot to do. Mostly I'm looking around the stage trying to find clues and waiting for another 3 pages to go by before I have another line. And in about the 6th row, I just happen to be looking out, and this man, he raises up his arm kind of in a strange way and then keels over. And people start screaming. Paramedics come in. They wheel the guy out of there. We stop the play. The man has passed away in the 6th row of the theater and had a heart attack and died. Wow. So now the stage manager comes over to me and Charlie says, okay, we got to start the play up again. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like half the audience had left. It's like, but the show must go on.
Yes.
So about 4 nights later, the air conditioning still is not working properly. Same thing happens again. I don't know if the second guy died or not, but the paramedics came. So when people say like, we killed in New Haven, we killed in Hartford, we absolutely did kill in Springfield.
You certainly did, and you stole my thunder. I was going to say, boy, the show really does go on, and you're right. So you've gone through so much to be, do you find yourself, right now, did you find yourself, you had to bust your ass to get where you are today. It seems like that people kind of, I don't know, it seems like they think acting is just this glamorous thing that you can just kind of step into, and there's really no work involved. I just look at somebody like you, DB, and you've really busted your ass to get where you are today. And I don't know, talk a little bit about the price you have to pay to get where you are now.
Well, I remember, it's funny. My mind was in that sort of theater moment. And I remember Live Aid, I guess it was in 1984, and Led Zeppelin was going to play for the first time in however many 8 years or something since they broke up. And it was going to be a big deal. And all my friends were going to Live Aid in Philadelphia. And I was doing a play. I was in Agunquit, Maine, and I was doing a play with Nanette Fabray, which was, it was a really fun, stupid little play called Upper Broadway. And, I couldn't go. I had to do the play. So, but I was really torn because I thought, well, I could just quit the play and go to Live Aid with all my buddies, but I didn't do that. So anyway, there's been a lot of sacrifices along the way in terms of life events. But as far as the acting thing, I've never felt like it was a sacrifice. I've always felt like it was a privilege to be an actor, and there's certainly a lot of times when I'm embarrassed by some of my fellow actors or people in my business. But generally speaking, there's a great dignity in getting up every day and going and trying to tell a story and trying to entertain people and trying to be positive. So. I would say that the benefits have outweighed the sacrifices.
Yeah, and, you're one of the few guys, or actors, I should say. I really believe, DB, when I watch you in your work, when I watch you overall, you're one of the few people I really feel like what you see is what you get. You seem very down to earth. You seem grounded. You seem like a good guy. And that speaks volumes in kind of the person, I think, that projects onto others. I think that's how many people see you.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. I try to make sure that my work is, not, I don't want to say honest, because it's not really. I'm sure there's a lot of people that are honest, and that it doesn't come off that way. I just want to be true. I want to feel like if I'm watching a movie or I'm watching a character, I want to feel like, I believe that this thing would follow from the thing that just came before it, and I believe that this person under these circumstances might do this thing. Because I feel like that's really reassuring to the audience if they feel like they can count on the character to see them through the story. And that's kind of the way I've tried to approach it.
Yeah, that's really well said. And I'm not going to go through your whole filmography. I've selected 2 that I just want to talk briefly with you. I'm not going to keep you on forever. You've got so much wonderful things that you've done on your filmography. But I wanted to ask you a question that really, it applies to you, but not directly. All these shows like Roseanne, Will and Grace, One Day at a Time, all these awesome shows that were on in the 80s, 70s, 90s, Full House, are now coming back in reboots. Same thing with movies. Like, they just redid Death Wish and The Birds they're going to redo, and Flash Gordon. DB, aren't there enough ideas out there that we don't have to keep recycling these same shows? Like, I want to see and hear a fresh idea from DB Sweeney or a fresh idea from another actor. Why are we recycling this old stuff again that's already been ground we've already been through?
I think that it's laziness. It's marketing people who are just, it's like, well, we have a built-in audience because they know this title. And it's laziness. So, but I agree with you 100%. I never saw Will and Grace when it was on the first time. I have no plans to watch it this time. But I don't know. There's a lot of stuff I don't really get. When I watched the Oscars and I saw The Shape of Water because it was getting all this hype, and I thought it was terrible. Yeah,
and there's movies that were, and there's a few of those. I saw 3 Billboards, DB, and I was like, I don't get it. I don't understand the hype, but I don't know. It is what it is, I suppose.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that one because I watched that one just yesterday. And, I'm trying to catch up now on all these movies that got celebrated. And I think that movie is full of shit. And I'll give you one specific example why it's full of shit. The setup is that there's 3 kids and the one daughter has been raped and murdered, and that's the inciting incident of the show. Or that's not the inciting incident. I mean, that's the history of what triggers the whole story. And then 30 minutes into the movie, we meet Frances McDormand's other daughter. And we don't really know much about her, but the kids are obviously suffering the loss of their daughter and the craziness that their mom's going through. And the mom says to the daughter asks for the car, and the mom says, you can't have the car, walk. And the daughter goes, okay, I'm going to walk, and I hope I get raped and murdered on the way. And the mom says, yeah, I hope you get raped and murdered too. And I thought, not in any world, not in any universe, does a parent who suffered the loss of a child in that horrific way, would they, even in anger or jest or any other way, wish that on their surviving sibling. So I just kind of checked out at that point. It was like 35 minutes of the movie. I kept watching it, and there's a lot of other things wrong with the movie, that you're not going to believe, in my view. But, there you go. That's the most celebrated acting movie of the year.
Yeah, and I completely agree with what you just said. And, I really liked Woody Harrelson in that movie. And what they did to his character is ridiculous, even more ridiculous. Like, what? Yeah, I don't know.
He loves his family. He's having a magic time, managing his death, his impending death. And he goes out to the barn and kills himself. It was completely unbelievable. Like, he put a bag over his head so they wouldn't find his head blown off, but they're just going to find his body and his notes and all the notes he wrote to the survivors. If you care that much about other people, you wouldn't kill yourself. You'd try to live another 3 months. You'd try to live another 3 minutes. So it was just, I think it's a really wildly overpraised movie.
Yeah, especially when you have 2 young girls and a beautiful wife that you care deeply for. You wouldn't do that. So do you get screeners a lot, DB? How does that work? Do they send you?
They're not sending out as many screeners as they used to. I don't think so. And I like to go see it in the movie theater. Like, I live here in Illinois, and there's a great movie theater in Downers Grove called the Tivoli Theater. It's like one of those old school 1,500 seat theaters where you could just imagine they used to have the organ and everything, and they do concerts there sometimes too, but they show movies and it's just this massive screen with good sound, and I think that's really the way movies are meant to be seen.
DB, anything you see this past year that you really are a fan of?
I guess I should have been ready with that. I thought Dunkirk was phenomenal.
Yeah, me too.
That was incredible. I mean, Nolan is probably the best director working right now. And the acting in that show, and Kenneth Branagh, who at times can veer into, some overacting, although he's incredibly skilled at overacting when he does it. I thought it was one of his best performances. I thought that the kid, the young flyer, was tremendous. I thought everything about that movie was great. And it's just interesting to me that, in this era that we're in, where it's all about, issues and social issues and politics instead of like just quality. I mean, that movie was far and away better than everything else I saw all year.
Yeah, I agree, and I like the movie called Wind River that came out. I thought that was really
I've heard of that one, but I haven't seen it. I'll look for that.
Yeah, and it got shit on because Harvey Weinstein's company put it out, and it's too bad because they took it out on the cast, I felt, but I don't know, whatever.
How stupid is that? You want to go back to the last 20 years of Hollywood, and Weinstein's an animal and an idiot and deserves everything that happened to him, but he also... his company released probably 200 of the best 500 movies that came out in the last 20 years. So what are you going to do? Relook at everything? It's crazy.
Yeah, it's hard. Yeah, it's well said. So my father, he lives now in Nevada with my mother, but he used to travel for his business. He loves Chicago. Man, what is it about Chicago that appeals to you and so many people?
Well, I was one of my older friends is a hockey player, Chris Chelios. He used to be the captain of the Chicago Blackhawks. So in the 1990s, when he was here, I'd come in and see him, and we'd hang out, and it just always felt like the best town ever. And every chance I've had since those days to come back and visit, I always thought, that's the best city in America. It's the best people. It's beautiful, the architecture, the food, everything about it. It's best sports fans. And this is coming from a Red Sox fan, so believe me, that's a hard thing to say. But, I just loved it. And I have two teenage kids who 5 years ago were 11 and 9, and my son plays hockey. And my daughter likes horses, and I just thought, LA is like so overrated. I'd already been living in New York. I didn't want to go live in a concrete environment again. So my wife and I settled on western suburbs of Chicago.
Yeah, and we'll do this in reverse. So I usually ask you this last. What do your kids, especially your son, think about Cutting Edge?
Oh, I don't know if he's ever sat through it. My daughter liked it. She had a figure skating moment when she was 6 or whatever, but I haven't. They haven't seen much. They saw when they were really little. I showed them this animated movie I did for Disney called Dinosaur.
Yes.
And I think they've seen a chunk of Lonesome Dove, but I've sort of really made a point of trying to just be dad more than like some guy with a weird job.
So I had a press pass earlier in the year. I want to say October to one of these Comic Cons, and I got a chance to talk to Paul Michael Glaser. I said, this might be the most underrated movie of all time. He goes, yeah, I can't do a Paul Michael Glaser, but he goes, yeah, he goes, all they kept saying was all he knows how to do is action movies. All he knows how to do is action movies. And I said, well, you clearly can do a sports movie too. And I had earlier on the show, DB, I had Dwyer Brown came on, so I got a little bit of a cutting edge connection here. Talk a little bit about Paul Michael Glaser and that experience, because I have a few questions about the Cutting Edge.
Well, I had, Cutting Edge it turned out to be such a great thing. And at the time, I thought, this is kind of a quirky, weird movie. And then I met Moira Kelly, and I thought, this is going to work, because if she's in that role, this thing will work. And they gave us 3 months. Neither she or I could skate. And she was living in Long Island. I was living in New York City. So they rented out this rink called Sky Rink on like 49th Street and 9th Avenue or something on the 8th floor of an office building. And we used to go there and skate every morning. And it was very much like what the characters did. Wake up earlier than you want to and go skate. And one day I liked Moira. The first day I met her, I thought she's the character. She's spunky. She's a pro. Everything about her was great. And I thought this is going to be good. But there was the rink had these rules, like hockey time was like 7 to 9:30. Then figure skating time started 9:30 to 11. And then it went back to hockey from 11 to 1:30. But MGM had bought the ice. It was our ice. Those rules were just on the wall. But Moira wanted to follow those rules. So like when we would have our figure skating session at 9:30, one day I had my hockey skates. I didn't want to change into the figure skates because skating the figure skates is a pain in the ass. So, like in the movie, you fall down. So I was like, I'm just going to skate with these. And Moira got really mad. She was like, you got to put on your figure skates. And I was like, and after that, I never put the figure skates on again because it just got her going.
Yeah, and you spent hours, and I was researching this today, hours and hours in skates, and you guys kind of spent a lot of time together just getting ready. I look at this movie on a whole. This movie works for a couple reasons. Without you or Moira Kelly, this movie does not work, and the writing too. I think those are the 3 big reasons. Any other 2 actors in this movie doesn't work at all.
I agree. I mean, and Tony Gilroy is one of the great writers in Hollywood, and this was the movie that made him or got him going anyway. He's obviously proved himself in many other genres. But I think the movie it gets the respect from audiences. I mean, everywhere I go, people love this movie. I mean, it's 25 years. They're talking about making another sequel to it. It's had 3 sequels that Moira and I didn't do. And we actually just got a call last week from Robert Court, the producer, who wants to think about remaking the movie or making a sequel to it finally that had Moira and I in it.
Good. So,
I mean, whether or not any of that happens, it's just funny to me that, you watch like these Oscar movies and I don't know. I feel like this movie is more solid or as solid as anything that gets celebrated year in and year out. And yet sometimes when people say that's a great movie, they say it like it's a cult classic or it's a guilty pleasure or they have these derisive ways of sort of acknowledging it. And I'm like, you know what? You show me a better romantic comedy in the last 20 years and I'll watch it.
DB, how about you show me a better romantic comedy maybe ever? And I agree. I was thinking this last night. I'm like, I hate when people throw the term cult on because it's almost like it's taboo to like it and say it's a great movie. And I'm not saying this because I'm speaking with you, DB. I'm going to tell you straight up. This is one of my favorite movies of all time, and I have no life, and my life is all about watching movies. This stands the test of time, my man. This movie, you laugh, you cry. I'm a grown man. I'm a grown ass man, and I'm going to tell you right now, when you look at her before you guys take the ice and tell her what you feel about her, I love you, man. I still cry to this very. I'm going to catch shit from my friends from saying this, but man, tears still roll down my face when you do that.
Well, I'm so glad to hear you say that, and that's the reaction I had the first time I read the script. I thought that the journey this guy goes on from being a knucklehead hockey player to absolutely needing this woman, it's just a great romantic arc. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Terry O'Quinn and of course the late great Roy Dotrice, who was so good in this movie, and Dwyer Brown was terrific in the movie. There was so many people that contributed to it, and William Ivey Long was the costume designer, who was mostly a Broadway guy. It was genius of Robert Court to bring him in because he brought a theatricality to it that I think a Hollywood person might not have gotten. And so I just think a lot of things lined up, but it just goes to show you how hard it is to make good movies. And I think I've been in 80 or so movies, and less than not double figures of good ones. So it's really hard to make a movie.
It is, and like I told you earlier, people really fall. They love the character of Doug, right? They love Doug. They love Moira Kelly's character. They see Kate. They see these two that are. It's no bullshit. These two are genuinely people. That's what they gravitate to, and they buy it. It's not just this bullshit. I know there was remakes. I left that out. It's like the movie Major League, right? It's a great movie, and then there was like 2 or 3 others made. People ignore those, right? So when you tell me that this movie might be done again with you guys involved, you just made my day.
Well, we'll see. I don't know if it's just talk now, but I think it would be fun if they come up with the right script and they want to do it the right way. Moira appears in my movie that I directed, 2 Tickets to Paradise. And that was a great favor of her to do that, and I renamed her character Kate just as a little homage to the movie. But I'd do anything with Moira again. I think she's one of the best actresses that I ever worked with. Yeah,
I wanted to talk about her briefly. DB, she is beautiful. She can act she can act with the best of them. She can act her ass off. She is nothing short of phenomenal. A really underappreciated actor.
Yeah, there's a story about her. She was on The West Wing, and this will tell you what kind of person Aaron Sorkin is. So Moira was complaining in the first season on West Wing that she never had anything to do. She'd have like one line, and then she'd wait 6 pages. So then she sort of respectfully complained about it, said, I want more to do. The next episode, Aaron Sorkin gave her 0 lines, but put her in every scene, like she opens the door, she gets the coffee, whatever, like. And then after that, after 2 or 3 episodes of that, she asked to be released from the show. So, I know Aaron Sorkin's one of our celebrated writers, but if he's doing that to Moira Kelly, he's doing it to everybody, and he's an asshole.
Yeah, that's a shitty thing to do to somebody. That's a I've had a few directors talk about similar kind of circumstances. That's a shitty thing to do. Do you think, DB, that the time you got, all that time you spent together during Ice Time, do you think that really adds to what you and Moira were? Like, do you think that's what it was, the time you spend with each other? And does that help, project that on screen?
Well, it does help in the case when you develop, I don't know what, maybe Moira has a different view of me. I don't know, talk to her all the time. But my admiration for Moira it definitely finds its way to the screen, and it made those days really a lot of fun. I've been in situations where with other actors that I'd rather not name who it makes it harder. The more time I spend around them, it makes it harder for me to act like I like them in the movie. So it's a two-edged sword. I think if you have a rapport and you're enjoying each other's time in pre-production, you're enjoying working together on your characters, that's great. But if the opposite is true, like with these other actors, it can really, I could look across and pretend that a guy is, he's the kind of guy that would go save a dog from a burning building. But if I've already seen him berate a barista sounds like a band. How about that? But if I've already seen somebody be an asshole in so many ways, it's hard for me to overlook that as I'm trying to, like their character.
Yeah, and you know, you mentioned all those wonderful actors, and you know the Roy who has since passed, a great English actor. You know why? One of the reasons why this movie works as well, it's obviously centered around the two of you, is that like many romantic comedies have to use cheap shit like sex and just like I don't know, just a lot of different things. This was just a great story about two people whose love is like you see, I don't want to sound like over the top ridiculous, but you see the progression of how they feel about each other. It's just a wonderful old school story, man, that just works. There's no cheap thrills. There's no cheap way out. It's hard work, it's effort, and it just pays off in the end.
Yeah, I mean, it's great to have, you know, like I said, I have a few Amen Out and Lonesome Dove and, you know, 3 or 4 others that people watch over and over again, and I'm just very gratified. I'd like to be in another one soon, you know, but it doesn't seem like it's getting any easier to make movies.
No, it doesn't. And, you know, I must have worn out, you know, 2 VHS tapes and 3 DVDs with this thing. I mean, that's how much I love it. I must watch this movie twice a month still, and I love it a lot.
Well, back in the days of video stores, you know, in the 90s, I had so many video store owners tell me that they ran through 30 copies of that. And I had an executive at MGM tell me at one point, just before the turn of the millennium, that this was the highest, the most profitable movie in MGM history that didn't have James Bond in it.
Wow.
They still call it a cult classic. It's like, how much money did it have to make before it's a hit?
Yeah, can we stop with the cult already? Like, it's not, you guys have established this, you know, you're so right with that, DB. And there's a couple movies that really took off on VHS. And when people ask me what's a movie I recommend, this is always one. And Shawshank Redemption is the other one that took off. These are the 2 movies you guys in Shawshank, you know, take off on DVD and VHS. And like I said, another testament to you. DB, you ever get sick of toe pick when people say it to you like nonstop?
No, I mean, if I'm used to being out in public, and the funny thing is, if I'm hustling through an airport and I take a bad step, I'm going to hear 5 people. So, yeah, I think it's just one of those things. I mean, you know, I'm just grateful that I'm, you know, that part. I mean, I guess, you know, like I remember Tropic Thunder is a pretty good movie, underrated movie, and I thought, you know, and Ben Stiller has this character who's got special needs or whatever, and the idea that that's the only character that everybody seems to want him to be remembered for in that story, that's a funny thing, I think, because I'm just glad that Doug Dorsey is a kind of a cool guy and girls like him, and so if you gotta be remembered for something, there's worse things in the world. Yeah, well said. And were you at all intimidated by the fact that the team that you guys are rivaled against weren't the actual figure skaters? Yeah, that was Christine Huff and Doug Ledrette. They were sort of, I don't know if they were certainly in the top 5 pairs of Canadian skaters that during that time or recently. They were playing the Russians, and just about everybody else in there. Our skating choreographer was Robin Cousins, and you know, he's a Olympic medalist. So yeah, it was a real world of high end skaters. But what I found out very early was, and Moira broke her leg, so Moira hardly skates. She doesn't skate at all in the movie, except I think of one scene. Most of the other time, she's on a camera dolly or she's being pushed around with trick photography. So because she got injured, I had to skate a lot more than I did. So her double was somebody named Sharon Cars, who was also a high-end skater. She looks almost exactly like Moira from almost every angle except dead on. And what I learned was when I was skating with Sharon, you know, the man is in the back usually as you're skating, and if you just imitate the stride of your partner, you skate better. So I skated with her. I skated with a lot of other world-class skaters, and they make you better. Yeah, for sure. And that real cool, that wonderful scene in the bar where you guys are, you know, having shots and all this. She's still sitting down, right? And you got to stand. You're the one standing and dancing, right? That's going to be a little bit awkward, right? Yeah, well, it's just awkward because she's a better dancer than me without the use of her legs. So, you know, but no, you know, every day with her was a pleasure. You know, she just came ready to go, ready to hit the ball back no matter what you did, and so you know, those are great memories. Yeah, I mean, I have a few more questions for you, DB. I really can't thank you enough for coming on today. Yeah, ever since I must have a 20+ year crush going on her. I mean, she has it all. There's nothing she doesn't have. She's beautiful. She's talented. She has it all. Well, you have excellent taste, and I agree with everything you said. So you weren't really you're a huge hockey guy now, and I know you're really awesome about doing these, you know, celebrity and these fundraising games, which is so awesome of you, and like I said, speaks volumes of who you are. But you weren't a big hockey guy before this movie, right? Well, I was a big fan, you know, but I had never really, you know, dove into it deeply. Big New York Rangers fan growing up in Islander country, but no, I'd say I was more focused on baseball, and but the process of making this movie and then the aftermath of it, I became a hockey junkie. I started skating a couple times a week, and even to this day, I try to at least skate once a week, and I think it's the greatest sport, all things considered.
It certainly is the greatest sport, and when you talk to people about pro athletes, time and time again, the nicest pro athletes that you get every corner is the hockey players are the nicest guys on the planet. You always hear that.
Yeah, well, I think that's sort of because it's a self-policing society, and you can't be a jerk for very long in that world without getting your head knocked off. Baseball is, unfortunately, in my sport, it's more like tennis. It's you against the pitcher. It's you, it's really not a team sport in the sense that you have to, execute like team play to succeed. It's an individual game masking as a team sport. So I think some of that a lot of that filters down into the character of hockey players.
Yeah, and I've told you why I love the movie for so many reasons. I mean, this movie literally is perfect a sports / romantic comedy as it gets. Why do you love it? Why do you think this works, DB?
Well, a lot of the stuff we've talked about, it's a story. It's like a chick movie that guys can watch. And, I think people, they can't always break down for you why something represents, skill. But I think that people can tell that Moira's not exactly like that character. I'm not exactly like my character, but we're rendering them, very effectively. And I think that people respond to that.
Yeah, I think they do, and I think this is an all-time classic movie, not cult movie. So the last thing I wanted to ask you about was, my God, one of the best movies ever, 8 Men Out, equally as good as Cutting Edge, phenomenal movie. You and Dwyer share this baseball connection. From my research, DB, you're a really good baseball player.
Well, thanks for saying that. I mean, if somebody said that, I appreciate it. I was okay, and the challenge of that movie was learning to hit left-handed when I was a righty all my life. So I spent a lot of time on that. And it's funny you mentioned Dwyer because they asked me at the same time I was doing 8 Men Out if I would do Bull Durham and play the Nuke LaLoosh part, and the schedule wouldn't allow it, and I couldn't do it. And I actually think it worked out better for them because I think Tim Robbins I think it's funnier casting that it's him versus Kevin Costner. Me versus Kevin Costner, I could be like his little brother or something, and it's just more weird having the girl go for Tim Robbins, I think. So I thought it worked out well for them. But then after we finished 8 Men Out, they were going to do Field of Dreams, and they offered me the role of Shoeless Joe Jackson in that. And I was afraid that I'd become typecast as a baseball player because, being a baseball player and then playing one in a movie and then playing the same character in another movie. So I turned that down, I regret that to this day because that's a beautiful movie.
Wait, did they offer you the Shoeless Joe after knowing about 8 Men Out?
Yeah. Well, they wore our costumes in Field of Dreams. Like those costumes were created for 8 Men Out and then they were used in Field of Dreams.
Whoa! You just blew my whoa! You blew my mind. So you had both. So you did. I was about to tell you that you are by far my favorite Shoeless Joe, but I totally didn't know that you were offered that role in Field of Dreams. Yeah, that was just stupid of me. I guess I should have gotten better advice on that one because that's a very iconic and wonderful movie. So I asked you the question of why the Cutting Edge works. Why does 8 Men Out work? Well, I think I don't think 8 Men Out works as well as The Cutting Edge because it has too many characters. But I think that in a way, with the people that it does work for, it works. I think because you can choose a storyline to follow. With The Cutting Edge, it's about Doug and Kate, and a person dealing with Doug or Kate. But 8 Men Out is the gamblers, the players, the owners. I think in hindsight that Mr. Sales would have been well served to hone it down a little bit. Maybe make it, you can call it 8 Men Out, but maybe make it a little bit more about a couple of players. So, but I'm very proud of the movie. I think it's a beautiful movie. But I just find that as a writer now and just looking at the movie in hindsight, I just feel like it needs more of a narrative drive. And so I'm not trying to talk you out of liking the movie. I like the movie a lot too. But I just feel like I think that The Cutting Edge more completely achieves what it sets out to do. Yeah, I love them both a lot, and I got to say, Cutting Edge is in my top 5 to 10 of all time. You can ask anybody that knows me. Let me ask you, what did you learn about Shoeless Joe in that, maybe researching that part? Is there anything that kind of surprised you that you maybe already knew?
Yeah, you know, I did a lot of background on him, and finding out that he wasn't as dumb as the legend says, you know, was really interesting to me. I also found out that Ty Cobb wasn't as much of a scumbag as the legend said. So those two things were both created by sports writers, and that I brought this to John Sayles, the famous courtroom step scene of Say It Ain't So Joe never happened. But the more interesting thing that did happen was, in those days, the players would sometimes not change at the ballpark. They'd go back to the hotel and change. So in the next season, in the movie, it's all a 1919 season, but the truth of the Black Sox scandal is that these players all played in 1920 season. They were in first place again, and they were getting ready to throw the next World Series too, and that's when the boom fell. So in that next summer, as the rumors started building, Shoeless Joe Jackson and Hap Phelps, the Charlie Sheen character, were walking back to the hotel, and a bunch of kids were behind them, just running and yelling and saying, "Hey, we know it's not true. Say it's not true, right? We know all the rumors aren't true." And I thought that would have been a much more beautiful scene to show our faces and us the shame of knowing it is true, and all these little kids that we've let down behind us thinking they're just, you know, cheerleading for it. I thought that would have been better, but John didn't go for that.
Yeah, that's really a quick question. And I have a few more questions for you. Thank you so much, DB. Let me ask you, does Shoeless Joe and or Pete Rose belong in the Hall of Fame?
Well, I mean, you know, how about Curt Schilling? I mean, are we going to really judge people based on whether or not we like them as people or what their achievements were on the field? The PEDs are a different thing. I mean, players that cheated, like, you know, the Rafael Palmeiros and maybe the A-Rods. I think that's a separate category. But, you know, I think that, you know, how do you keep Pete Rose out of the Hall of Fame? I mean, he's you know, he's got more hits than anybody has by, 800. So, I don't know. It's a thorny issue. I suggested many years ago that they just set up a separate wing of the Hall of Fame, call it the Rogues Gallery. Put Ty Cobb in there, put Pete Rose in there, put Shoeless Joe in there, and, you know, maybe put A-Rod in there, and I bet it'll be the most visited part of the Hall of Fame. But you say these are people who had character issues or may or may not have cheated or whatever they did. But to say they can't go in the Hall of Fame, it's like when they just took away Louisville's championship NCAA basketball. It's like, what do you mean you take away the championship? They won the title that year. If they cheated to do it, then certainly put an asterisk there or whatever, but you can't vacate a win any more than you can vacate Pete Rose's 4,400 hits.
Yeah, that's really well said. You brought something up two things up that I totally agree with. Sports writers have way too much of a pull into who gets to the Hall of Fame. Most of these guys have not played an inning of baseball or softball or a sport in their lives, and they're determining the final, I guess you would call it what would you call it? It's a legacy of some of these guys. Curt Schilling is being penalized, and I'm not going to talk politics. He's being penalized for what he believes politically, and that's unfortunate, DB. That really is.
Yeah, he's got one of the greatest records of any big game pitcher of all time. I think he's 16-9 in playoff games with a 2-point-something ERA, 3-point, whatever it is. He's a pure money pitcher. 2 championships. You know, I mean, he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. The idea that he's not in makes the whole thing, you know, it's ridiculous. It's a whole other subject, of course, as you say. But you know, I think that the reality is that, you know, these guys, they did what they did on the field, and then that should be what gets looked at. So I don't know why there's even voting about it. I mean, it should be, because if you get 3,000 hits, you pretty much go in the Hall of Fame. So there shouldn't be a vote. If you get 3,000 hits, you're in. 300 wins, you're in. And then there could be other metrics too, like your war in the postseason. Let's just set up some rules of what makes a Hall of Famer and take it out of the hands of these, you know, pencil-headed, you know, writers who, like, as you say, never played.
Yeah, you know, and Boston has, and I love the Red Sox. Boston has some of the biggest asshole sports writers on the planet, and they're very vindictive people. Trust me, if they want to get you,
I know.
If they want to get you, they're going to get you. I wanted to talk just real quick. I know you directed a phenomenal movie. Talk about the challenges of being on that side of the camera, DB. How tough is it? Is it a big change for? Was it a big change for you?
Yeah, it's you know, it's a big adjustment, and that particular movie was I wrote it and I also financed half of it. So when you have your own money up, and you know, it's about a $20 million movie that we made for $2 million. So the challenge is every day is like, hey, all right, do I do another take, or can I use that $1,800 for my son's college fund? And it's tough to have those kind of things going on in your head when you're trying to make a movie. So I'm looking forward to it. I got another one I've written, and hopefully I'll be on another year or so to talk about it, but or whenever it comes out. But you know, I'm going to make sure that I delegate a little bit more of the decision making about the financial side of the movie on the next one, so I can focus entirely on the creative side. With that said, I'm really proud of Two Tickets to Paradise, and it's won a lot of awards. And unfortunately, we got caught in a lawsuit with the studio, and the movie kind of fell between the cracks.
Yeah,
So,
I was just going to bring up it's an award-winning movie on many levels. Many levels. How about faith-based movies? I interviewed another actor that's big into faith-based movies. I thought I read where you were also a big proponent of faith-based movies.
Well, I'm a proponent of faith-based movies if you include It's a Wonderful Life. All movies used to be faith-based. Good storytelling. Star Wars is a faith-based movie.
True.
So I don't think movies necessarily need to quote scripture or anything to be faith-based. And I think it's unfortunate that to get that tag on you these days sometimes is a diss, which is astonishing to me because, what else is more important than faith, whether, specifically religious faith or, just faith in your friends, so, excuse me. I'm interested in that genre and love to do more. I'm very proud of The Resurrection of Gavin Stone, which was a very small budget movie that came out on 1,000 screens. So that's totally beating the odds.
Yeah. Is there anything you wanted to promote? That's the last thing I have for you. Anything you wanted to talk about? Anything?
I got a movie coming out today called Dead on Arrival, which is available on iTunes. It's in theaters in New York and LA just for a couple of weeks. That's the new model that they go with. And I play a backwoods Louisiana character, and I really like this part. And I rewrote the lines with the director's blessing, and it was a lot of fun to play this character. I kind of did a whole riff on the Kardashian family and what a scar they are in the society, or actually not a scar, an open wound. And so I really enjoyed that, and I'm on a show called Ice on DirecTV starting on March 28th with the great Ray Winston.
Yeah, well, you are one of my favorite actors on the planet. The Cutting Edge, one of the best movies in history. Not a cult classic, one of the best movies in history. You're one of those guys, this will be the last thing I say, DB. You're one of those guys that if I met you in a bar, we'd have a few beers, and 7 hours later I'd walk out more informed, and I'd be like, wow, that guy's a great guy. So you really are a good dude. I have to say that, DB. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks a lot. Thank you very much for taking all this time and for having me on.